There are two sentences in the Bible that can help us move from fear into peace or prosperity or expansion. Interestingly, it occurs in first book of Chronicles, chapter 4, verses 9 and 10. It's the story of a little-known character named Jabez. Jabez only appears in the Bible for those two sentences, but they are powerful indeed. Let me share with you those two sentences. It says, Jabez was honored more than his brothers, and his mother named him Jabez, saying, because I bore him in pain. Jabez called on the God of Israel, saying, oh, that you would bless me and enlarge my territory, and that your hand might be with me, that you would keep me free from hurt and harm. And God granted what he asked. This is a very beautiful prayer, and it seems, pretty nondescript, pretty ordinary. But if we really get into it, we'll see that it has a profound message for us today. It's a very short little story. Basically, something started out badly for this guy named Jabez. There was an unusual little prayer in the middle, and then it seems like things turned out very well. So what does this do? This little story is meant to serve as a balm, reminding us that even when it seems that we've lost sight of the gold in ourselves, the light of our true nature cannot be dimmed, tarnished, or erased. It reminds us that no matter how many layers of doubt and fear cover our basic goodness, it's always there, waiting to be discovered and to shine through all parts of our life. Juan Enrique Toro greeting you on this fine day. Thank you for the thumbs up. Thank you for those subscriptions. And thank you to all of you for those wonderful donations. The link to those donations are found below. So we have this short story. Jabez doesn't appear in the Bible again, but this little prayer, in fact, there's a whole book called The Prayer of Jabez, helps us move from fear into a new state of consciousness. It is a new beginning. It is a way in which we can use prayer as a correction, right, to the path that we're on. It can help us move away. So let's take a look at it step by step. We're going to take 4 parts of this prayer. So the first one is, oh, that you would bless me. And here in that word, oh, right, to me really speaks of a profound desire, of an urgency within him, of a vulnerability that he has. It seems that things aren't going very well for Jabez. And we have a clue on this when it says that his mother named him Jabez because she had a lot of pain in childbirth. Now, if your name, if the name they have given you, it reminds you of the pain, then you're going to carry, right? Your very name is going to carry pain into your life. So we can only assume that Jabez, with that kind of name, was going around introducing himself as the one who causes pain. Now, if we're going to cause pain in others, we actually have to have a lot of pain within us. And everything that we give, we receive, right? So there's a lot of pain inside of Jabez. And there comes a time in his life when he says, enough. I recognize it. I'm seeing this, and I really want to change it. And so he does what he knows to do. He calls out to God. He's declaring that the goodness within himself has been tarnished, has been buried, right? And we really need to identify here with Jabez. Inviting you today to recognize what is going on inside of you. Just invite you to find something in your life as you listen to this message that is causing you some stress or producing some fear in your life. Let's focus on fear. Because sometimes Fear is the underlying emotion behind all of our stress, behind all of our problems. Let's not choose the biggest fear, but maybe there's a conversation that needs to happen that you're kind of afraid to bring up. Maybe there's some tension around your economic situation right now, some fear about that. Maybe there's some health issues that in the back of your mind you're kind of fearful about. Maybe there's some opportunities that you're afraid will pass from you. Well, all of these things can really do a number on our psyche and, of course, on our body. And I'm inviting you today to recognize that fear. All right, to recognize it, to see that it's there, to acknowledge it. Recognize and acknowledge it, because when we are aware of fear, fear is a contraction. There's a pressure. There's a smallness that comes with fear. Fear sort of limits us, puts us in a hole. For the purposes of our message here today, let's imagine that we're being put into a tomb. Fear, in a way, buries us, buries the light, right? Puts the bushel of God's light, puts the God's light under a bushel, rather than putting up on the table where everyone can see, right? And so the purpose of this prayer for Jabez was to recognize that, to acknowledge it, and to say, I would like something different. And this obviously is high consciousness work. He's using this prayer in a very effective way to have a new beginning, a new start. And maybe we're in the same place ourselves. What we want to do is to bring ourselves from fear, to raise ourselves up from that tomb of smallness and darkness and compression, and bring us into a higher expression of being, more free, more expansive. And the image I like to use today is coming up from the tomb of fear and jumping into the river of grace. I like that image because if I come out of a tomb, I might be just covered in dirt or mud or whatever, and I jump into the river and I get purified and I'm carried along. I'm carried along by grace, by light, by love. So I'm going to invite you to join me in this prayer that Jabez prayed. Obviously, it worked for him. It can work for us. So we begin today by acknowledging and saying to ourselves, oh God, that you would bless me indeed. Just invite you to say that in your mind's heart. Maybe even say it out loud. Oh God, that you would bless me indeed. Feel that vulnerability, that openness, that desire, that willingness. And then he goes on to say, enlarge my territory. And I love those words. That's what I titled this message this. Enlarge my territory is a beautiful declaration, a wonderful declaration from the smallness, from the tightness of fear to a more expansive expression of life. Here Jabez is calling on for expansion. And he's talking about basically prosperity, abundance, expansion of all areas of our life. You might ask yourself today, how big is your territory? How big is your awareness? And I'm not just talking about material good. Obviously, it includes material good, but how large is your life, right? How vital, how much energy, vitality is there within you? Is the world full of possibilities for you, of material good? Yes, let's not keep that out. Of freedom. How much freedom do you feel, or do you feel very constricted? Do you have influence in the world? Is there an abundance of peace and love in your life? This calls for obviously some inner investigation, right? Investigation to see where this fear may be and what is it that's calling us, right? It's a beautiful expression. And when Jabez says, enlarge my territory, he is really embodying that scripture from Jesus himself, who said, in Luke 12:32, he says, "Do not be afraid, a little flock, for it is your Father's good pleasure to give you the kingdom." And I love that. Do not be afraid, little flock. The little flock is that fear within us, right? That smallness, that buried in the tomb consciousness. It says it's your Father's good pleasure. It's God's good pleasure to give you the kingdom. And so Jabez, when he prays and he says, "Enlarge my territory," he's affirming that for himself. It's the Father's good pleasure to enlarge my territory, to bring me from this small, constricted consciousness into a state of life, abundance, vitality, expansive nature. And so I invite you to pray that with me today, knowing that it's the Father's good pleasure to give you the kingdom, to come out of that tomb of darkness and fear and jump into the river of light and grace and abundance. Do that with me now. Oh God, that you would bless me and enlarge my territory. Oh, I love that. Enlarge my territory. And then he goes on to say, "And that your hand would be with me." This is a very beautiful declaration, that your hand would be with me. Because whatever we do in our spiritual practice, it always needs to be accompanied by a sense of kindness, of nurturing, of grace, of softness, of care, of compassion, right? We, in our own mind, we carry a lot of judgment, a lot of condemnation. We see our world, we see things that we don't agree with, that aren't right. And we hold on to those, right? And we know that anything that we're judging outside of ourselves is merely a reflection of what we're judging inside. Again, you can't give anything that you don't already receive. And so when we judge, when we condemn, when we can call wrong or bad, we're just speaking about ourselves. And so when Jabez says that your hand would be with me, he's looking for the comfort of God. He's looking for the strength of God, the support of God. He's looking for that way in which he can move through these difficult changes and transitions in life with a state and awareness of grace. That the transitions, that the changes might fall in a space of grace. And so this really calls for us to be aware of self-care. Right? How are you taking care of yourself? Are you being good to yourself? Are you being kind to yourself? As we recognize these fear thoughts, and as we're calling upon enlarging our territory, can we deal with those things, those fear thoughts, those erroneous beliefs, those very painful moments and memories and traumas that we're holding within us? Can we accept them with grace and with kindness, with self-care, with compassion? We're inviting all of these dark weaknesses, errors, problems, judgments, condemnations, ways that we judge ourselves terribly. Our heart is big enough to hold them, to embrace them, to feel them. And as we do that, we are aware of how it is that we're taking care of ourselves. Are we eating the right food? Are we taking care of our body correctly? Right? We know what to do. What kind of music are you listening to? What kind of media are you exposing yourself to? Is it supporting the kindness, the grace that you're looking to establish in your life? Right? What are you reading? What kind of people are you associating with? All this contributes to reminding yourself of the state of grace that we want to be in. And so, as we've been doing in this video, just invite you to remember that it is God's good pleasure to give you the kingdom. And so let's pray this prayer together. Oh God, that you would bless me indeed and enlarge my territory, and that your hand would be with me. come out of the tomb, the darkness of fear, and jump into the river of peace, of expansion, of love, of grace, and of self-care and compassion. And finally, Jabez says that you keep me from hurt and harm. Remember that Jabez was named after the pain that his mother experienced in childbirth. We assume that there was a lot of pain in his life. This is why he came to this prayer. Oh, that you would bless me indeed. He was ready for a change, for a new beginning, just like we can be in any moment in our life. And this part, keep me from hurt and harm. The word keep is key, I believe. When he says keep, what he's implying is that he understands that this is not a one-time prayer, that this is something that needs to be done over and again. There's a consistency that's required. And so what we're talking about here today is obviously our spiritual practice, our discipline, to be constant in it. The idea here is to, as we face these profound fears or these traumas or these situations, however dark and difficult they may be, we need to remember that it is our consistency in bringing ourselves back to the light, to coming up from the tomb of fear, throwing ourselves into the river. Is not a one-time effect. It requires constant effort, constant memory to change the paradigm, to change the consciousness, to lift us up, right? And so, we need to see where it is that where we're forgetting, where it is that we're falling into the fear, right? We find ways to remember ourselves. I think I've told you that as I travel to work, I go into the subway, and of course the subway is underneath. But that subway, which is sometimes very noisy and very dirty and sometimes smells not so good, but that subway car is my temple. I walk into that subway car and right away I feel that I'm in a holy and sacred place. And that's oftentimes where I spend 20, 25 minutes doing my practice, my meditation, my remembering of myself. And as time goes on, we want to add practice. We want to find ways of adding habits, of finding light in our life. So we have maybe a morning routine where we remember, we set an intention for the day, where we remember what it is that we want to experience. Maybe we have a little physical movement that we do, some kind of yoga, some kind of movement that helps us spark that inner light within us, some kind of discipline that we do in the morning, however short or long. We find ways during the day to remember, to breathe, to be conscious, to know and accept who and what we are. Before you hit the send button on the email, just take a moment to breathe. Remember yourself, read over your message, and then click send. It's just milliseconds, but it helps so much in remembering who and what we are. And during the day, we find ways to remember. Maybe we have something positive written nearby where we can remember. Maybe we have ways of incorporating the memory of God in all of our activities. And of course, in the evening, we have an opportunity to do, again, our spiritual work. And before we go to bed, those last few seconds, especially before we go to sleep, we bring in something positive, something that reminds us of who and what we are. We practice forgiveness, letting go of all the ways in the day that we didn't show up the way we would have liked to have showed up. We forgive ourselves. We forgive life. We forgive everybody in our world. We release it all and we turn ourselves over to sleep. These are all ways to live very consciously. And sometimes if you do enough of this work, when we wake up in the middle of the night and fear has grabbed us, you got that bill to pay you don't have the money for. You got that situation coming up, that job interview, that situation that brings, that awakens you with fear. Fear of the future, fear of what's going to happen. But if we're doing our practice right away, something will come in, a song, a writing, an idea. Oh Lord, that you would bless me indeed. Oof, right away, the consciousness begins to change. We find ourselves in a new state of being. And we have the opportunity to come up from that tomb of fear into the light of grace, the jumping into that river of light and grace. The other day I was just watching a movie, and I asked myself, as the movie had begun, about 15-20 minutes, I asked myself, is this movie really inspiring me? Is it bringing me joy? Am I really enjoying this? Is this really supporting this idea of life and love? And I realized that no, it was just numbing. It was just numbing me out. I decided to let go of the movie and to do something completely different. Just because we have this idea of being constant. And so, the prayer of Jabez. Oh, say it with me now. Oh, that you would bless me indeed, and enlarge my territory. That you would keep me from harm, and that your hand would be with me. We come out of the tomb of fear, we jump into the river of light and grace and love. Juan Enrique Toro greeting you on this fine day, thanking you for showing up, giving us the link, the like. Your subscriptions always help. And thank you so much for those donations. Once again, the links are below. Reminding you today and always, life is consciousness, and consciousness is life.